Remember when Canada was just America's quiet northern neighbor? The country everyone called polite, rule-following, and always apologizing? Well, those days are over. A single trade move by Trump was supposed to bring Canada to its knees, but instead, it flipped the entire relationship upside down. Trump's 35% tariff on Canadian goods was meant to be a show of power, a classic strong-arm tactic. But what happened next stunned the world. Canada didn't fold. They didn't plead. They responded in ways that completely reshaped not just trade, but the balance of influence across North America. Today, we'll break down how this so-called tough strategy backfired and what it means for millions of jobs, industries, and global politics. Trump thought he was setting the rules of the game. By slapping a 35% tariff on Canadian goods, Washington expected Canada to panic and beg for relief. Instead, Canada played it cool. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't shout, didn't threaten, he simply leaned on the numbers. And those numbers told a different story. Under the USMCA agreement, around 95% of Canadian exports to the US still flow tariff-free. Economists call this a paper tiger tariff. It looked tough, but its real impact was just 2 to 5%. Trump miscalculated badly, and Canada quietly exposed that weakness. The real shock came when people realized just how much the United States depends on Canada. Nearly 9 million American jobs are tied directly to trade with Canada. That's not an abstract statistic. That's auto plants in Michigan, steel mills in Pennsylvania, aerospace factories in Kansas. And here's the kicker: Canada buys more US goods every year than China, Japan, Korea, the UK, and France combined, over $350 billion. When your biggest customer is sitting across the table, do you really start by threatening them? Trump underestimated Canada's leverage, and in doing so, put millions of American workers in the line of fire. While Trump played a short game with tariffs, Canada played the long game with diversification. Imagine you run a business and your main customer suddenly becomes unreliable. Your smartest move: find new buyers. And that's exactly what Canada did. In just months, exports to Japan climbed 23%, sales to Germany rose 46%, and exports to the UK nearly tripled. This wasn't a small adjustment, it was a full rewiring of trade routes. Canada showed the world it no longer needs to rely on just one market, while 9 million American jobs suddenly became more vulnerable than ever. Trade wars don't just hit governments, they hit people's everyday lives. Take wine. When US wine imports collapsed during this dispute, Canadian wine sales inside Quebec surged 60%. Local producers filled the shelves overnight. US wine imports into Canada, down 98% from last year. That isn't just a sales shift, it's a cultural change. Consumers started turning inward, supporting domestic products instead of foreign ones. And once habits change, they rarely go back. What was supposed to punish Canada ended up strengthening its homegrown industries, leaving American exporters scrambling to recover. Another example is aluminum. For decades, Canada shipped raw aluminum south where American factories turned it into cans and products. Tariffs made that expensive. But instead of complaining, Canada built its own canning industry. By doing so, they're preparing to strip billions in business from US manufacturers. What began as a penalty became a growth strategy. And then came the political shockwave. Canada recognized Palestinian statehood despite US threats. Trump fumed, warning of difficult trade consequences. But Canada stood firm. This wasn't only about Palestine, it was about sovereignty. The once quiet neighbor showed it could say no to Washington. Meanwhile, America's own numbers began turning ugly. The US trade deficit jumped 19% in May. Exports dropped while imports stayed flat. Aluminum prices at home skyrocketed 80% since May, making everything from beer cans to car parts more expensive. The average price of a new car in America just broke $48,000. Families and workers, not politicians, are the ones paying the bill. If you've lived through past trade wars, the pattern looks familiar. Tariffs pile up, costs rise, and the everyday consumer shoulders the burden. Only this time, the pain is hitting faster than anyone expected. But the boldest move came from Canada's energy sector. For decades, nearly all Canadian oil and gas flowed south to the US. Now, for the first time, Canada shipped LNG tankers directly to Asia, earning 35% higher prices. Even more significant, deals were signed in euros and yuan, not US dollars. Every shipment like this chips away at America's leverage in global trade. For Canada, it marks a turning point, no longer dependent on one buyer, no longer playing the junior partner. The quiet neighbor has become a confident, independent force on the world stage. So what does all of this mean? For the US, it's higher costs, lost leverage, and growing dependence on a neighbor that's no longer silent. For Canada, it's stronger domestic industries, new global markets, and a louder diplomatic voice. The balance of power has shifted. Now the question is, does this confrontation make both countries stronger in the long run, or weaker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to Geopolitics Daily for more analysis. Because in today's world, understanding how trade and geopolitics really work has never mattered more.